Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. This is your one-stop shop to learn the business side of your practice on a deeper level. On this show, we empower you to own your CEO status to scale your practice for growth, sustainability, and profit. Listen in as we talk about how to market your practice to gain more visibility, hire, build, and engage your ride or die dream team, create streamlined operations, and make financial decisions as a CEO. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. Let's get started. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. It is Brandy here, Brandy Mabra, and I am excited to do this because I recorded a podcast episode. I'll be honest, I'm just going to dive into the story, but I recorded a podcast episode and it ended up being a little long. I had a lot to say in this episode. So, what we're going to do is we are going to actually break it up into two parts. So, you are going to receive part one now, and you will get part two next week. So, we are talking about business health check ins. And once I started to record the episode, just to give you a little bit of behind the scenes, I start to go into all these rants about different things and just different areas of your practice. So by the time I looked up, I was like, wow, this is a little long. And so I know that our folks usually listen to these episodes in the car or while you're doing other activities. And I want you to be in a place where you can actually absorb the information and take notes and write things down because there's a lot of great gems that are in there. And I always know usually when you start to dive into the topic of business health check-ins, there's things that come up for you, inside of your practice. So I want to honor that. So we're going to split it up into two episodes. So again, you'll get episode one today or part one today, and then you'll get part two next week. And it's all about business health check-ins. I want to make sure since we are going into and getting ready to go into, it's crazy, for the second part of the year. So my goal over the next couple of months is to make sure that you're fully prepared for that. So we are in May, which is 5 months in June, which would be 6 months in, which means we're halfway through the year. And my goal always is to make sure that you are set up for success inside of your practice, that you are making more money, that you have more time, that you're paying attention to how things are happening in your practice, and that you're fully set up for success. So enjoy these next couple of weeks for part one today and then part two of business self check-ins. There are spurts of time, whether you are getting our private practice scoop. Every week, I send out an email newsletter giving you how-tos and different tactics that you can do inside of your practice. So whether you were getting that, there's versions of this. I've done this actually as a full-blown training. I did that maybe about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, where we went through this whole exercise. If you are inside a private practice CEO, you definitely do this. And it's just a really great way for you to understand what exactly is happening in your practice. So, whether you are at the beginning stages of business ownership, or if you are at the stage of making millions and millions of dollars, I don't care. You have to stop and do this. And this is whether you are working inside your practice, running your practice, kind of in and out of your practice. I don't care what your day to day looks like. You have got to stop to do this in one way or another. Now, at different stages of business growth, this will look different because as your team gets bigger, as you continue to hire, as you start to bring on leadership team, you will do this in different versions, but it's still the same type of conversations and it's still the same type of check in. It just is different. The dynamic of it changes. So I'm going to do my best to try to talk about it, what it looks like at each stage of business growth. I want you to, as usual, get a notebook, get a pen, get ready, take some notes, because this one right here, I guarantee you will help you make more money. So let's go ahead and dive in. So for like the coined method is called the pillar method. And if you're like, oh yeah, I know the pillar method, I've seen it. And if you have seen it, it's probably because you've seen it on our private practice health assessment, which I'm going to put the link to that in our show notes for you to download if you have not taken that assessment. Even if you have taken that assessment, I recommend for you to go back and take it again, especially if it's been a while, because I'm curious to know what your new business health score would be, because every time you take it, you get a business health score. And I'm curious to know if it's changed, right? So on that assessment, it's going to ask you about how many days you might take off out of your practice if you've hired, what kind of people you've hired, whether or not you have policy and procedures documented or not, how closely you're paying attention to your money. Like, there's a lot of great questions on there just to get you to think when it comes to your practice. Because at the end of the day, what you have is a company. And I need for you to start viewing it that way compared to just like, oh, I've created a job for myself. That's the whole point of owning your CEO status is you are creating something bigger. And I'm really excited because I'll say over the past few days, clients were gearing up for our retreat, our Reignite CEO retreat in New York City. So that is happening for our clients. And I'm so, 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 so excited. I'm super excited. And we are talking all about wealth and financials and how to leverage your practice in order to make more money and all the things. And so we're hanging out in the financial district. We're in a beautiful, gorgeous hotel. And I'm just super excited. We're going to have amazing food and connection, and people are getting excited. They're getting like their partners together for like shopping, and some are bringing their partners with them and making it more of like a vacation time. It's going to happen in June and summertime in New York City. I'm just super excited. Part of this, though, is you have a practice, you have an asset. Out of every single type of entrepreneur, I always like to say this, and I like to make sure I remind you, you are the most set up for success being in healthcare to sell a practice that is going to be very lucrative. You can sell it and walk away and have millions of dollars in the bank. And that is just real talk. At the end of the day, what kills me is people just treat it like, oh, I'm just trying to make a job for myself. No, like if you are wanting to truly, truly, truly build wealth for yourself, if you are sitting here listening to this saying, man, I really want to make more money. Man, I want to have financial freedom. Man, I want to make sure I'm setting my family up for success. Then you need to be paying attention to how you're building your practice. And I think for me, I work very closely with the clients that I work with because I pride myself on creating like intimacy and exclusivity when it comes to the practice owners that I work with. That's by design. I am naturally, just a little bit about me, I'm naturally a relationship builder. So I like intimate spaces. And that is what I want to create, at least at this point in time. So for me to say, oh, I'm going to be working with like the masses, I have no desire. I have no desire. I have no desire to have like a Facebook group with 10,000 members in it. No desire. I want to make an impact. I want to help more people, but I wanna do it in a way that feels good, in a way that I can actually give quality, in a way that I can make sure that my clients are set up for success and that they're making more money, they are saving time, they're hiring the right people, their operations are streamlined and efficient, and they know that they're working with somebody or surrounded by folks who are gonna help make their journey so much easier, right? And so I just don't desire to do that. I desire to make an impact through a completely different way when it comes to, like writing a book, for you to read a book. And even when the book comes out, I will still keep my space very intimate. I don't know. That's just me. That is just me. I love the fact that we've been able to build a really great community. I have thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are part of the community between all the platforms. But in regards to how I work with people, I just want to make sure that you get transformation, that you get results. And so that's why even with this podcast, I try to make sure I go very deep and it's not 9-minute episodes or, quick 10-minute tidbits. And, I just want to make sure that you are set up for success because when it comes to your practice and the work that you do in it, you have to stay in business. Like you just have to. And I don't want you to sell it for desperate out of desperation. I think say that every single week, but that is truly what my mission and vision is. So I want to make sure that you are set up for success. And so I cannot drive home enough how important this episode is for you, and for you to actually take the time to do it. And I know reminders are always helpful because we get busy. Life is busy. Life is always lifing. And we have to make time. We have to be very intentional with our time and how we treat ourselves and how we are setting ourselves up for success as the business is happening. So, what we're going to walk through today is called the pillar method. It is my signature method. I would love to say, like, oh, yes, I named this when everything happened with me. I'm going to talk about a story for my private practice days and, practice management, all this stuff. And what happened to me? So I have worked with some amazing billers and coders. If you do not know, and I'm going to answer this question, I'm going to answer this question because I know it's a question that I get oftentimes. What is the difference between a biller and a coder? Because inside of private practice CEO, we have people who are hiring billing specialists. We have people who are hiring billing and coding specialists, and we have people who are hiring coding specialists. So, what is the difference and why does it matter? A biller is basically a data entry type person. So they are the ones who are just entering the codes or pushing through the codes, whether if it's from your EHR or maybe they're updating, they're inputting information. They might be able to add like a modifier, like those types of things. It's more or less where they understand billing. They understand how CPT codes work, how E&M codes work, how diagnosis, matching it all up, how all of that works. That's a biller. When we're talking about a coder can actually read medical documentation and pull out those codes that you would need to use, those diagnoses that you could put with it, and also the E&M, like, appropriate codes that all fit together would be a coder. A lot of times you can hire a coder and a biller in one person, which is actually my favorite type of person to hire because now you have somebody who can look at who can look at a note, can look at documentation and recognize, "Oh, you should add an additional code or you left off a code, which is how you can make more money, or we need to add a modifier here in order to make sure that this gets paid." Or you have put on the completely wrong code. This makes no sense. And you didn't document enough information in your note to even support this level of coding. So, a coder is somebody who can bring a certain amount of expertise to the table, can actually change things without the provider's input, and they are able to decipher so much more information, right? So, that's a coder. When you have a biller, now if a biller is experienced, if a biller has been doing this for a while, they actually can probably go through and say, especially if they're very familiar with the specialty, we are probably leaving out this code or this code doesn't make sense for what's been documented. They can do that, but they just can't change it without your approval, right? So a biller is more data entry, more like I have to come to you to ask questions or get your approval to change anything compared to a coder. A coder is just like, listen, this is what it is. You're leaving money on the table here, or you're overcharging. So you need to document more if you want to use this code, like those types of things. And so it's very powerful when you have one of those folks inside of your practice because now you're able to keep your billing in house. They're able to keep an eye on things. They're able to work with you in a more closer setting. They're able to do audits, especially if you have multiple providers, all the stuff. So that is a sidebar to this, but I just want to make sure I'm setting up the precedence of what I'm about to tell you when it comes to my story. And then also, because I get this question a lot, especially if you're working with some crazy billing vendor. I'll be honest, I have yet to work with a billing vendor that I've been extremely impressed with. And there's stories that my clients have had because I've been on meetings with like billing vendors with my clients. And some of it is just, it's unfortunate. It really is. Some of it, I don't want to call it a money grab, but, just keep an eye on your billing. That's all I'm going to say. So there was a month where my biller, my amazing biller, I still talk to her today, and coder, she's a biller and coder, where she decided that she wanted to do something more, right? So she, after being with us for years, she decided that she was going to leave and do more of a consulting type role and high level education and stuff. And rightfully so. I mean, she was so good, so good. So she put in her notice, and I did not prepare for it the way that I should have, but we ended up finding like an interim solution of a biller and went with that. So I am just in the practice, managing the practice, leading the practice. Things are happening every day. Patients are being seen. We are doing all the stuff, collecting copays, insurance information, collecting outstanding balances, just doing all the stuff that we normally do. And I am thinking everything is being done behind the scenes when it comes to the billing piece. So fast forward to the end of this month, because this is like the first month without my coder and biller, I get an email saying I'm extremely behind and I have not been able to touch any of the billing for the month.
And we're now getting close to like month end. So I'm like, oh crap. And I ended up losing six figures of revenue for that month because I did not just have a simple conversation with the biller. And it is something that I've said in the past, but it's something like looking back. I mean, even looking back, it still makes me mad because I'm like, wow, all I had to do was stop and take 2 seconds to just pay attention. Because I would have been able to see if I went into our, EMR system and looked at it, that nothing had been entered. There was nothing that was sent through. And I had access to all of that. But I was stuck in being behind. I was stuck in the weeds of my practice. I was stuck in just trying to get from one day to the next day and from one task to another task. And I would love to say that we were short staffed or I didn't have enough team or no, but at that point in time, I was not leveraging my team the way that I should. I was not owning my CEO status and I was just putting out fires all day long. And so when I got the email, I was like, what in the world? What in the world? So nothing ended up getting entered. Nothing. And it was because the biller who was helping out on an interim basis had so much other work that she had to do, she wasn't able to get to my practice. So all that billing sat. A whole month's worth of billing sat. It was a multi-million dollar practice. So at the end of the day, I'm saying six figures, but you have to put that into perspective is like multi six figures worth of just billing, just sitting there and like, didn't even go out because it couldn't. There were certain things that like processes, procedures, like, we couldn't just push claims through. It was like a whole process to make sure that we were capturing everything, and my heart just sank, my heart just sank. So, the P&L came out, the profit and loss statement came out, and it didn't look too bad considering what had happened, but because everything hadn't caught up to it yet. So, naturally, because we had been doing stuff, there was revenue that was coming in the door, and there was money that was there, but at the end of the day, that six figures needed to get multi six figures needed to get put into the system too because we needed that revenue down the line, right? And so as the P&L started to come out, 60 days after that situation happened, 90 days, like you could just see the biggest difference in it. And I just want to tell you that, like, you have to stop and take a beat. I mean, you just have to. Like, you cannot sit there and not pay attention to your money. You cannot sit there and just allow for yourself just to be stuck in the day to day. And especially if you have a team. And if you have no other conversations with anybody on your team, please have conversations with your biller, whether if it's a billing company, whether if it's the person that's inside your office. Like, the best practice and what we have our clients do is meet with their billing teams at least once a week. So that way they're up to date on the latest and greatest. Having detailed conversations, making sure that they know holistically what's happening within their practice because it's more than just what's in the bank. Like, amount of money that you have in your bank is only one part of your financial picture. And so when we start to dive into this pillar method, it was developed partially because of that situation, right? Because I didn't stop. I didn't do a business self check-in. I just kept going and going and going. And so fast forward over the amount of years that I've had, I've worked with companies and practices that have had millions and millions of dollars coming in the door, but they still were not healthy. They weren't holistically healthy. Team members were not happy. People were leaving, turnover was high, and it showed, and eventually these things catch up with you, and so you can only get to a certain place in your practice before it will cost you a lot of money, and you will sit there and be like, "Man, I'm broke, and I don't have the financials to show for all the work that I'm doing," and it's because you're not stopping and actually paying attention to it, how you're working in your practice and how your team is working in your practice. So at the end of the day, this is why this episode is important, and this is why we're talking about it. So the pillar method is consistent of 6 pillars. The 6 pillars are marketing, financial, operations, practice experience, team for your leadership, and then you as the CEO. And it's important for you to understand how each area is going inside of your practice when you're doing this. So, a lot of times, what happens is folks will get to a place where their schedules aren't full, whether if you're in the solo space or if you're in the team group practice space. And they'll just like, I don't know what happened. Everything was going really great. And then everything just stopped. And now things are moving slowly. And so when you actually stop and take a minute and pay attention to how are these areas of my practice doing, then it's very insightful. And a lot of times I'll jump over to marketing and say, especially if someone says, okay, I am not making money. Well, the two areas that I always pay attention to is operations. What is your operations looking like from front to back or from like your revenue cycle? So from the time that the patient calls or the client calls to the time that the invoice goes out or the statement goes out or billing, like all of the things. So I'm looking at the front to the back. The second question that I always have is like, what's your visibility look like? How often are you marketing? And it's amazing to me. People will say like, well, it's either like a bottleneck or, well, I mean, I haven't really been out in yeah, I haven't really done any marketing. Or I'm on social media, we do posting. That's not marketing. Or people will say, "Well, I have like one event." Okay, that's not marketing either. Like there is a whole strategy that you have to have when it comes to marketing. And so this just allows for you to understand when you start to actually sit down and ask yourself questions, how are things going? So the first thing is the 6 pillars of business excellence. So when we're talking about the pillar method, the 6 pillars of business excellence are, I'll repeat them again, marketing, financial, operations, practice experience, team for leadership, and you as a CEO. I hate when I created this. I honestly, but at this point in time, it just is what it is. The U pillar, which is 6, should actually be first because at the end of the day, you have to be at your best. You have to show up in your practice and make sure that you're set up for success because if not, then the whole practice will go to shambles. It is just true. So even going back to the story, part of the reason why my practice wasn't set up and part of the reason why I lost, multi six figures of revenue is because I wasn't showing up my best self. I was showing up from a place of just being all over the place and not structured, and it showed up inside of my business. So you have to make sure you are set up for success first. So the first thing that you want to think about is what is happening in the practice? How does the practice feel? Just overall. Does it feel like it's running smoothly? Does it feel like it's moving the way that it should, or do things feel a little funky? And if they feel a little funky, where do they feel funky at? This is why I always say well oiled is a myth. Having a practice that is completely well oiled, especially as a growing practice or especially just in entrepreneurship, is a myth. There is usually some type of area inside of your practice that needs to be refined or it can be enhanced. And, there might be one area that runs really great and another area that's a little shaky. And that's normal. That is completely normal. For this exercise, it's to help you to identify where's the funkiness at and then where is the smoothness at. So that way you know what's what and what's working, what's not working inside your practice. So that's the 6 pillars. So make sure you write that down. The second thing is as you're thinking about these things, you wanna dive into what are your thoughts and feelings and actions that you're taking inside of your practice. You always wanna make sure that you understand that you are the one that's in control of your practice, not at the mercy of your practice. And it's important for you to understand that you need to set yourself up for success. So when we're thinking about marketing, we need to think about visibility. There's 3 phases of marketing. There's the attraction phase, the engage and nurture phase, and then the commitment phase. And so when we're thinking about your marketing, how many people have you gotten in front of? How many people know about you? How are you engaging and nurturing those folks once they find you? And then how are you letting them know that you can actually help them? And how are you letting them know how they can come into your practice to receive your services or to see your providers? And so you have to make sure that you are in a consistent marketing cycle. Most times people get tired or they'll say, well, I'm full. I can't continue to market and I'm on wait list. And so if I keep doing this, but what happens is that you get out of your cycle, you don't pick up back up your cycle, and then you go through the wait list, and then you get to a point where you're like, man, everybody's fallen off and now I cannot fill my schedule. I see this at this point in time because the business climate has changed so much over the past couple of years. I see this in the solo space and I see it in the group practice space. both. So if you're sitting up or thinking like, "Oh, I'm good. I have a wait list and I'm by myself." No, you're not. No, you're not. You just sit tight and just keep being in the weeds of your practice and then let me know in about 6 months how your schedule looks. Just let me know because the natural cycle of patient care and the natural cycle of people is they come into your practice to get better. They come into your practice to help stay well. They come into your practice maybe sick and then they're going to, get better. Their health situation is going to change unless if they have something extremely chronic, their health situation is going to change. So you have to make sure that you're continuously in this cycle so that way you can continuously make sure that people are coming in because as people kind of just phase out or they end up going to instead of maybe a weekly schedule or a monthly schedule or every 6 month schedule, they might move to a once a year schedule, or maybe they're moving from the once a week to the monthly schedule. Maybe they no longer need to come into your practice. So you have to pay attention to those things. So that is why, even if you were on wait list, that you have to stay in this cycle because people are going to fall off. And then when you are trying to come from a place of scrambling to get people into your practice, it doesn't work. There are short-term marketing strategies that you can do, absolutely, but they still take time. People still need to schedule a consultation. That might take a week. They could say no. Once they're on that consultation, they could decide to come into the practice and they could decide they don't like it. They could have an appointment. They could no-show the appointment. They could reschedule the appointment. So there's a lot of things that can happen where you staying in this marketing cycle is so important at every stage of business growth, every stage. And especially if you have multiple providers, you have to make sure that you are continuously doing this because your providers, you might be talking about a different specialty. So, for example, we have a client who has multi specialty inside of her practice. And so one particular pillar is full. The other two specialties actually need a little bit more of a detailed marketing strategy. So instead of talking about the one specialty, we are strategizing for her marketing strategy to talk about the other two specialties and putting those as priority. Because at the end of the day, like you have to make sure that everybody is in this cycle, right? If you have multi specialty, you have to be in this cycle. Each one has to have their cycle. And that can be very taxing and it can be exhausting. And a lot of times people burn out because of the amount of visibility that is required. So, this is why having a team, this is why making sure that you're scheduling your marketing activities, you have dedicated marketing days, you are paying attention to events that you might want to attend months in advance, and you are not just doing things last minute.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.